The wind howled through the streets of Kearney, Nebraska, carrying with it snowflakes that cut like shards of glass against exposed skin. And Beatrice Kingsley knew that if she did not find food soon, she would not survive another night in this unforgiving winter of 1882. Her fingers, wrapped in cloth strips that had once been part of her petticoat, trembled as she knocked on the back door of the Golden Sage Saloon, praying that someone might take pity on a woman whose husband had died 3 months prior, leaving her with nothing but debts and a wagon that had been seized by creditors before his body was even cold in the ground. The door remained shut, and Beatrice moved on to the next establishment, her boots leaving dark prints in the fresh snow that filled almost immediately, erasing any evidence that she had passed this way at all. She had been a respectable woman once, the wife of Thomas Kingsley, a merchant who had promised her a good life when they married 4 years ago. She had been 19 then, full of hope and dreams about building something meaningful in this frontier town that sat along the Union Pacific Railroad. Thomas had been 28, charming and ambitious, and she had believed every word he spoke about the future they would create together. But Thomas had been a gambler, a fact he had hidden well until after their wedding vows were spoken. He had lost everything in card games and bad investments, borrowing from men who did not forgive unpaid debts. When he died of pneumonia last November, those men had come to collect, taking everything Beatrice owned except the clothes on her back and the thin wedding band she kept hidden beneath her glove. The cold seeped through her worn coat, and Beatrice felt her legs growing weaker with each step. She had not eaten in 2 days, having spent her last coins on a room at the boarding house that had kicked her out this morning when she could not pay for another night. The streets of Kearney were relatively quiet despite it being early evening, most sensible people having retreated indoors to escape the blizzard that had begun that afternoon. Beatrice knew she should find shelter, but without money or connections, there was nowhere for her to go. The church had helped her for a few weeks after Thomas died, but their charity had limits, and the reverend had made it clear that they could not support her indefinitely. She found herself standing outside the Frontier House, a restaurant that served hearty meals to travelers and locals alike. Through the frosted window, she could see people eating inside, their faces flushed from the warmth of the stove, their plates piled high with food that made her stomach clench with hunger so intense it felt like a physical wound. Beatrice knew she should move on, that standing here staring would accomplish nothing, but her body refused to obey. She was so cold, so tired, so desperately hungry that rational thought had begun to slip away. Before she realized what she was doing, Beatrice found herself at the back door of the restaurant, knocking with trembling hands. She had no plan, no prepared speech, only a desperate hope that someone might show mercy. The door opened a crack, and a woman with flour on her apron peered out, her expression hardening when she saw Beatrice. "We do not give handouts," the woman said curtly. "Move along." "Please," Beatrice heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have not eaten in 2 days. I am not asking for a full meal, just scraps, anything you might throw away, please." The woman's expression did not soften. "I said move along. We get beggars here all the time, and if I fed every one of them, I would be out of business. Go to the church if you need charity." The door slammed shut, and Beatrice stood there for a moment, swaying slightly on her feet. She should leave, she knew, but her body felt so heavy, and the wind was so cold. She sank down against the wall of the building, partially sheltered from the worst of the wind by the overhang above the back door. She would rest here for just a moment, she told herself, just long enough to gather her strength before moving on. But the cold was insidious, and Beatrice felt herself growing drowsy despite the discomfort. She knew this was dangerous, that falling asleep in this weather could be fatal, but she could not seem to keep her eyes open. Her thoughts drifted to her mother back in Ohio, who had died when Beatrice was 16, leaving her in the care of an aunt who had been eager to marry her off to the first man who asked. She thought of Thomas, who despite his flaws had been kind to her in his own way. She thought of all the dreams she had harbored about her life, dreams that now seemed as distant and unreachable as the stars. "Madam," the voice seemed to come from very far away, and Beatrice struggled to open her eyes. A man was crouching beside her, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, snow accumulating on his broad shoulders. She could see concern in his eyes, which were a striking shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over the prairie. "Madam, you cannot stay here," the man said gently. "You will freeze to death." "I just need to rest," Beatrice managed to say, though her words came out slurred. "Just for a moment." "You are already half frozen," the man said, and she felt strong hands grip her arms, lifting her to her feet. She tried to protest, tried to pull away, but her body would not cooperate. The man steadied her, one arm supporting her weight as he guided her away from the building. Beatrice assumed he was taking her to the sheriff, who would likely throw her in a cell for vagrancy, and she found she did not have the energy to care. But instead of heading toward the jail, the man steered her back toward the front of the frontier house. Beatrice's confusion must have shown on her face because he said, "I am taking you inside where it is warm. You need food and heat before anything else." "I have no money," Beatrice said, the words automatic even through her daze. "I cannot pay for a meal." "I did not ask if you could pay," the man replied. His voice was deep and calm, with a slight drawl that suggested he had spent most of his life out on the range. He pushed open the door to the restaurant, and a wave of warmth hit Beatrice's face, so intense after the bitter cold that it almost hurt. Several heads turned to look at them, and Beatrice was suddenly acutely aware of how she must appear, with her ragged coat and frost-covered hair, being supported by this stranger. The man guided her to an empty table near the stove, pulling out a chair and helping her sit. Beatrice sank into it gratefully, her legs no longer capable of holding her weight. The heat from the stove was overwhelming, and she began to shiver violently as her frozen body started to warm. "Wait here," the man said, and Beatrice watched through blurred vision as he walked to the counter where the proprietor, a heavyset man named Harold Peters, was watching them with obvious disapproval. "Warren," Harold said, his voice carrying across the quiet room. "You cannot bring vagrants in here. It is bad for business." "She is not a vagrant, Harold. She is a person who needs help," the man, apparently named Warren, replied. His tone was mild but carried an edge of steel. "I would like 2 of your beef stew specials, fresh bread, coffee, and whatever pie you have today." "I am not serving her," Harold said flatly. "Look at her. She probably has lice or disease. This is a respectable establishment." Beatrice felt shame burn through her, hot and acidic. She tried to stand, to leave before she caused more of a scene, but her legs would not cooperate. She heard Warren's voice again, quieter now but no less firm. "Harold, you have known me for 5 years. I have never caused trouble in your establishment, and I always pay my bills promptly. I am asking you, as a customer and as someone you call a friend, to serve this woman a hot meal. If you refuse, I will take my business elsewhere, and I will make sure every ranch hand and cowboy in this territory knows that the frontier house turns away people in need." There was a long silence, and then Harold sighed heavily. "Fine, but she sits at a table in the back, not where regular customers can see her." "No," Warren said, and Beatrice looked up to see him standing very straight, his hand resting on the counter. "She sits at my regular table, the one by the window." She sits there as an equal, as a human being deserving of dignity and respect. Those are my terms." Beatrice watched Harold's face turn red, but after a moment he nodded curtly. Warren returned to where she sat, moving his chair so that he was sitting across from her at the small table. He removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair that was slightly longer than fashionable, and Beatrice could see his face clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with strong features that spoke of years spent outdoors, and those remarkable blue-gray eyes that watched her with concern, and something else she could not quite identify. "Thank you," Beatrice whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Warren said simply. "No one should have to beg for scraps in the snow. I am Warren Quinn, by the way. I work on the Double R Ranch about 10 miles south of town." "Beatrice Kingsley," she managed to say. "I am a widow. My husband died 3 months ago." Warren nodded, his expression sympathetic but not pitying, which Beatrice appreciated. Before he could respond, a young woman brought over 2 steaming bowls of beef stew, thick slices of bread, and 2 cups of coffee. The smell of the food made Beatrice's stomach cramp painfully, and she had to restrain herself from grabbing the bowl and devouring it like an animal. "Eat slowly," Warren said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "I know you are hungry, but if you eat too fast after going without, you will make yourself sick." Beatrice nodded, picking up her spoon with shaking hands. She took a small bite of the stew, and the taste of it, the warmth and richness, was so overwhelming that tears began to stream down her face. She tried to stop them, mortified at breaking down in front of this stranger, but once they started, she could not make them stop. She set down her spoon, covering her face with her hands as sobs shook her body. She felt a gentle touch on her arm and looked up to see Warren offering her a clean handkerchief. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You have been through something terrible. Anyone would be overwhelmed." Beatrice took the handkerchief, wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. "I am sorry. This is humiliating." "There is nothing humiliating about being human," Warren said. "Take your time. The food will still be here when you are ready." They sat in silence for a few minutes while Beatrice regained control of herself. When she finally picked up her spoon again, Warren began eating his own meal, not watching her directly but maintaining a comforting presence across the table. Beatrice ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling strength gradually return to her body as the hot food filled her stomach. "How long have you been without shelter?" Warren asked after a while, his tone conversational rather than interrogative. "Since this morning," Beatrice replied. "I was staying at the boarding house, but I ran out of money. Before that, I was managing barely. I had been doing laundry and mending for some of the townsfolk, but when the weather turned bad, the work dried up. No one wants to hire a widow with no references and no family." "What about your husband's family? Or your own?" Thomas had no family. "He was an only child, and his parents died before I met him. My own parents are dead, and my only living relative is an aunt in Ohio who made it clear she wants nothing to do with me. She said I made my bed by marrying a Westerner, and now I must lie in it." Beatrice took a sip of her coffee, the warmth of it spreading through her chest. "I thought about trying to go back east, but I do not have the money for train fare, and even if I did, I have nowhere to go." Warren was quiet for a moment, buttering a piece of bread thoughtfully. "Can you cook? Clean? Do you know anything about managing a household?" "Yes," Beatrice said, confused by the question. "I ran our home while Thomas was alive. I can cook, clean, sew, do laundry, tend a garden. I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Quinn. I simply have not been able to find anyone willing to give me a chance." "It is Warren, please," he said. "And I might have a solution to your problem if you are willing to hear it." Beatrice set down her spoon, looking at him with a mixture of hope and wariness. She had learned the hard way that offers of help from strange men often came with expectations she was not willing to meet. What kind of solution? Warren seemed to sense her hesitation because his expression became very serious. Nothing improper, I assure you. The ranch where I work, the Double R, is owned by Robert and Ruth Reynolds. They are good people in their 50s, and they have been looking for someone to help Ruth with the housework. She has been having trouble with her joints, arthritis the doctor says, and it is getting harder for her to manage everything on her own. They have been talking about hiring someone for months, but they have not found anyone suitable. And you think they might hire me? Beatrice asked, afraid to let herself hope. I think you would be perfect for the position, Warren said. The job comes with room and board plus a small wage. It would not be luxurious, but you would have a warm bed, 3 meals a day, and honest work. If you are interested, I can take you out to the ranch tomorrow and introduce you to the Reynolds. The final decision would be theirs, of course, but I would speak on your behalf. Beatrice stared at him, trying to understand why this man, this complete stranger, was offering her such kindness. Why are you doing this? You do not know anything about me. I could be a thief or a liar or worse. Warren met her gaze steadily. I am a pretty good judge of character, and I do not think you are any of those things. I think you are someone who has had a run of bad luck and needs a hand up. Besides, he added with a small smile, I have 6 sisters back in Missouri. If any of them were in your situation, I would hope someone would help them the way I am trying to help you. 6 sisters, Beatrice repeated, and despite everything, she felt a small smile tug at her lips. That must have been interesting growing up. Interesting is one word for it, Warren said, his smile widening. Chaotic might be more accurate, but they taught me a lot about respecting women and understanding that circumstances can change in an instant through no fault of your own. My youngest sister, Sarah, lost her husband to cholera last year. If she did not have family to support her, she might be in a similar situation to yours. Beatrice felt something in her chest loosen slightly, some of the fear and shame that had been weighing on her for months. I would be very grateful for an introduction to your employers, Warren. Thank you. I do not know how I will ever repay you for this kindness. You do not need to repay anything, Warren said. Just promise me that if you ever see someone else in need, you will help them if you can. That is how we build a better world, one act of kindness at a time. They finished their meal in more comfortable silence, and when the waitress brought over 2 slices of apple pie, Beatrice found herself eating with genuine pleasure rather than desperate hunger. The restaurant had filled up more as they ate, and she noticed that while some people cast curious glances their way, no one made any rude comments. Warren's presence seemed to provide a shield of respectability, and Beatrice was grateful for it. When they finished eating, Warren paid the bill and then turned to Beatrice with a practical expression. We need to find you somewhere to stay tonight. The boarding house is out, but there is a widow named Mrs. Abernathy who sometimes takes in lodgers. She is a good woman, very religious but kind. I think she would let you stay the night if I vouch for you. I still have no money, Beatrice reminded him quietly. I will cover tonight's lodging, Warren said, holding up a hand when she started to protest. Consider it an advance on your future wages if the Reynolds hire you. If they do not, then consider it a gift. Either way, I am not leaving you to freeze on the street. They left the restaurant and headed back out into the cold. The storm had lessened somewhat, but snow still fell steadily, covering the street in a thick white blanket. Warren walked slowly, matching his pace to Beatrice's, as she still felt weak from her ordeal. They did not talk much as they made their way through the darkening streets, but the silence felt companionable rather than awkward. Mrs. Abernathy's house was a neat, two-story structure on the edge of town, with lamplight glowing warmly in the windows. Warren knocked on the door, and after a moment, it opened to reveal a plump woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair pinned back in a severe bun. Her expression was stern until she saw Warren, at which point it softened slightly. "Warren Quinn," she said. "What brings you out on a night like this?" "Evening, Mrs. Abernathy," Warren said politely. "I was hoping you might have a room available for this lady, Mrs. Kingsley. She is a widow who has fallen on hard times, and I am hoping to help her find employment at the Double R Ranch. She needs somewhere safe to stay tonight." Mrs. Abernathy's sharp eyes took in Beatrice's appearance, and Beatrice braced herself for rejection. But after a moment, the older woman nodded. "I have a room available. Can she pay?" "I will cover tonight's lodging," Warren said, pulling some coins from his pocket. "And if you could possibly spare some breakfast in the morning, I would be grateful. I will be by around 8 to collect her." Mrs. Abernathy took the coins and stepped aside, gesturing for Beatrice to enter. "Come in, child. You look half frozen. I will put some hot water on for tea." Beatrice looked at Warren, wanting to express her gratitude but not knowing how to put it into words. He seemed to understand because he tipped his hat to her and said, "Get some rest, Beatrice. Tomorrow will be a better day, I promise." She watched him walk away into the snow, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her life, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. Mrs. Abernathy was true to her word, providing Beatrice with hot tea and a small room that was clean and warm. The bed was narrow but comfortable, with thick quilts that Beatrice pulled up to her chin as she lay down, her body finally beginning to relax after days of fear and cold. She thought about Warren Quinn and his unexpected kindness, about the possibility of a job at the Double R Ranch, about the chance to rebuild her life into something stable and good. As she drifted off to sleep, she whispered a prayer of thanks to whatever Providence had sent Warren to find her behind that restaurant. Morning came with pale sunlight streaming through the curtains, and Beatrice woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks. Mrs. Abernathy provided a simple breakfast of porridge and toast, and when Beatrice thanked her, the older woman gave her a long, searching look. "Warren Quinn is one of the good ones," Mrs. Abernathy said. "Not many men would go out of their way to help a stranger the way he helped you. You remember that kindness, and you make something of this second chance he is giving you." "I will," Beatrice promised. "I intend to work hard and prove that his faith in me was not misplaced." Warren arrived promptly at 8, driving a wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses. He helped Beatrice up onto the seat beside him, and they set off toward the Double R Ranch. The sky was clear today, the storm having passed in the night, and the landscape glittered with fresh snow that reflected the morning sun like diamonds scattered across the prairie. "Did you sleep well?" Warren asked as they left town behind. "Better than I have in months," Beatrice admitted. "Mrs. Abernathy was very kind once she decided I was not going to rob her in the night." Warren chuckled. "She is a good judge of character. If she had thought you were trouble, she would have turned us away regardless of how much money I offered. The fact that she took you in is a good sign." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Beatrice took the opportunity to study Warren more closely in the daylight. He was tall and lean, with the kind of strength that came from years of hard physical labor rather than natural bulk. His hands on the reins were competent and steady, and he handled the horses with the easy confidence of someone who had been doing it his entire life. He wore simple clothes, a working man's attire, but they were clean and well-maintained. Everything about him spoke of quiet competence and integrity. "Tell me about the Reynolds," Beatrice said after a while. "What are they like?" "Good people," Warren said. "Robert is getting up there in years, nearly 60, but he is still as sharp as ever. He built the Double R from nothing, started with just 100 acres and a dream back in the 50s. Now it is one of the most successful ranches in this part of Nebraska. Ruth is about 55, and she has been the backbone of the operation since day one. They had 3 sons, but all of them went their own ways. One is a lawyer in Chicago, one is a doctor in San Francisco, and the youngest is in the Army, stationed down in Texas. They are proud of their boys, but I think it hurts them that none of them wanted to take over the ranch." "That must be difficult," Beatrice said, "building something and having no one to pass it on to. They have talked about selling eventually, but they are not ready yet. For now, they just want to keep things running smoothly. That is where you would come in. Ruth needs help with the cooking and cleaning, and Robert could use someone to manage the household accounts and keep track of supplies. They have about 8 ranch hands, me included, and during busy seasons, they hire more. That is a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of work for one woman, even with Ruth's energy." The ranch came into view after about 40 minutes of travel, and Beatrice felt her breath catch. It was larger than she had expected, with a sprawling main house, several barns and outbuildings, and corrals where horses stood stamping in the snow. The main house was a 2-story structure built of sturdy timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys, and Beatrice could see curtains in the windows, giving the place a welcoming, lived-in appearance. Warren pulled the wagon up to the front of the house and helped Beatrice down. She smoothed her worn skirt nervously, acutely aware of how shabby she must look. Before she could worry too much, the front door opened and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Ruth Reynolds was not a tall woman, but she had a presence that made her seem larger. Her hair was steel gray and pulled back in a practical bun, and her face was lined with wrinkles that spoke more of laughter than hardship. Her eyes, a warm brown, assessed Beatrice with frank curiosity but without judgment. "Warren," Ruth said, her voice carrying easily across the yard. "You sent word you were bringing someone to meet us. This must be Mrs. Kingsley." "Yes, madam," Warren said. "Beatrice, this is Ruth Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Beatrice Kingsley. I thought she might be suitable for the position you have been trying to fill." Ruth gestured them both inside, and Beatrice found herself in a large, warm kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The room was spacious and well-equipped, with a huge cast-iron stove, sturdy tables and chairs, and shelves lined with dishes and cooking implements. A doorway led to what appeared to be a formal dining room, and Beatrice could see stairs leading to the second floor. "Sit down, both of you," Ruth said, pouring 3 cups of coffee and setting them on the table. "Robert will be in shortly. He is just finishing up with the morning accounts. Now, Mrs. Kingsley, Warren tells me you are a widow looking for work." "Yes, madam," Beatrice said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My husband died 3 months ago, and I have been struggling to find employment since. I can cook, clean, sew, manage household accounts, tend a garden, and any other domestic work you might need. I am willing to work hard and learn anything I do not already know." "Tell me about yourself," Ruth said, settling into a chair across from her. "Where are you from? How long have you been in Kearney?" Beatrice took a sip of coffee to steady her nerves and then began to speak. She told Ruth about growing up in Ohio, about her parents' deaths, about marrying Thomas and coming west with dreams of building a life. She was honest about Thomas's gambling and the debts he had left behind, about the creditors who had taken everything, about the months she had spent trying to scrape by on odd jobs and charity. She did not cry as she spoke, having shed all her tears the night before, but she held nothing back. When she finished, Ruth was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she reached across the table and patted Beatrice's hand. "You have been through a terrible ordeal, my dear. It speaks well of you that you have not given up or turned to less savory means of survival. Many women in your position would have." Before Beatrice could respond, a man entered the kitchen from a side door. Robert Reynolds was tall and broad-shouldered, with a full beard going gray and keen blue eyes that reminded Beatrice of Warren's. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body was beginning to feel the effects of age, but there was nothing weak about him. "This is the young lady Warren told us about?" Robert asked, and Ruth nodded. He turned to Beatrice and extended his hand. "Robert Reynolds. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Kingsley." Beatrice shook his hand, surprised and pleased by the gesture of respect. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Reynolds." Robert poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at the head of the table. "Ruth and I have been needing help for a while now. She does not want to admit it, but her arthritis is getting worse, and managing a household this size is too much for one person. We need someone who can help with the cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general household management. The position comes with a private room, 3 meals a day, and $10 a month. You would work 6 days a week, with Sundays off unless there is an emergency. Does that sound acceptable to you? $10 a month was not a fortune, but with room and board included, it was more than enough to allow Beatrice to start saving and eventually build a more independent life. "That sounds very generous, Mr. Reynolds. When would you need me to start?" "Today, if you are willing," Ruth said. "I can show you your room and get you settled, and then we can start going over your duties. I will work alongside you for the first week or two, teaching you how things are done here, and then you can take over most of the daily tasks. I will still do the cooking for special occasions and help with larger projects, but the day-to-day work would be yours." "I am willing," Beatrice said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I cannot thank you enough for this opportunity." "Thank Warren," Robert said with a slight smile. "He is the one who came to us singing your praises. He said you were a hard worker who had fallen on tough times and deserved a chance to prove yourself. Warren is a good judge of character, so we trust his recommendation." Beatrice looked over at Warren, who had been sitting quietly during the interview, and saw him duck his head slightly, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "I just told them the truth," he said. "Well, that is settled then," Ruth said briskly, standing up. "Warren, you should get back to work. Robert is having the boys move the cattle to the south pasture today, and they will need your help. Mrs. Kingsley, come with me and I will show you your room." Warren stood, catching Beatrice's eye as he picked up his hat. "I am glad it worked out," he said quietly. "You are going to do just fine here." "Thank you, Warren," Beatrice said, putting as much feeling into the words as she could. "For everything. You saved my life." He shook his head. "You would have found a way to survive. I just made it a little easier. Take care of yourself, Beatrice." She watched him leave, feeling an odd sense of loss as the door closed behind him. Then Ruth was tugging her arm, leading her through the house, and Beatrice forced herself to focus on the present moment. Her room was on the second floor, small but comfortable, with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the ranch. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, and there was a quilt on the bed that looked handmade. It was more than Beatrice had dared to hope for. "This is wonderful," she breathed. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds." "Call me Ruth, please," the older woman said. "We are not formal here. Now, I know you do not have any belongings with you, but I have some dresses that should fit you with a little alteration, and we can work on making you some proper work clothes this week. For now, let me get you started on the laundry. With 8 ranch hands, we always have laundry to do." The days fell into a comfortable rhythm after that. Beatrice woke early each morning, helping Ruth prepare breakfast for the ranch hands who ate in the kitchen before heading out to their duties. Then she would tackle the day's chores: laundry on Mondays, baking on Tuesdays, heavy cleaning on Wednesdays, and so on. Ruth was a patient teacher, showing Beatrice how she liked things done but also giving her the freedom to develop her own methods. Robert was a quiet but kind presence, often stopping by the kitchen to check on their progress, and always having a kind word or a joke to share. The ranch hands were a mixed group, ranging from boys barely 18 to weathered men in their 40s. They were respectful to Beatrice, tipping their hats when they saw her and thanking her for meals, but they kept their distance otherwise, which suited her fine. The only exception was Warren, who seemed to make a point of stopping by the main house at least once a day, always with some legitimate reason, delivering a report to Robert, picking up supplies, checking on a repair, but Beatrice began to suspect that some of these visits were not entirely necessary. She found herself looking forward to these encounters more than she wanted to admit. Warren had an easy way about him, a quiet humor that made her smile even on difficult days. He never pried into her past or made her feel uncomfortable, but he showed genuine interest in how she was settling in and whether she needed anything. Sometimes they would talk for a few minutes about nothing in particular: the weather, the horses, the latest news from town, and Beatrice treasured these brief conversations. A month passed, and then another. Winter began to loosen its grip on the prairie, and by early March, the first signs of spring were appearing. Beatrice had settled into her role completely, and Ruth often praised her work, telling Robert within Beatrice's hearing that hiring her was the best decision they had made in years. Beatrice had begun to feel something she had not felt since before Thomas died: security and peace. One Saturday afternoon in mid-March, Ruth announced that she and Robert were going into town for supplies and to have dinner with friends. "We will not be back until late," Ruth said. "The ranch hands are all out mending fences in the north pasture, and they packed food with them, so you will have the evening to yourself. Why do not you take the opportunity to relax for a change? You have been working so hard." Beatrice appreciated the suggestion and decided to spend the quiet evening working on a new dress she was making for herself. She had saved up enough from her wages to buy some fabric in town, a pretty blue cotton that Ruth said brought out her eyes, and she was enjoying the process of creating something nice for herself. She was sitting in the kitchen with her sewing when she heard a horse approach. Looking out the window, she saw Warren dismounting, and a moment later there was a knock at the door. Surprised, Beatrice set aside her sewing and went to answer it. Warren stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking slightly uncertain. "Evening, Beatrice. I hope I am not disturbing you. I saw the Reynolds heading into town and thought I would check to make sure everything was all right here." "Everything is fine," Beatrice assured him. "The other hands are out mending fences, and Ruth told me to take the evening for myself. Would you like to come in? I was just making some coffee." Warren hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "That sounds good, thank you." He followed her inside, and Beatrice poured them both coffee, feeling oddly nervous. They had talked many times over the past 2 months, but always with other people around or with work to be done. This felt different, more intimate somehow, even though they were doing nothing improper. "What are you working on?" Warren asked, nodding toward her sewing. "A new dress," Beatrice said, showing him the partially completed garment. "Ruth taught me some new stitches and I wanted to try them out." "That is a nice color," Warren said. "You are very skilled with a needle." "Thank you. My mother taught me when I was young. She said every woman should know how to create beautiful things with her hands, not just functional ones." Beatrice set the dress aside and took a sip of her coffee. "What about you? What do you do in your spare time?" "I read mostly," Warren said, "and I write letters to my family back in Missouri. I am not much for fancy hobbies, but I enjoy a good book when I can get my hands on one." "What kind of books do you like?" "History mostly, and some novels when I can find them. I just finished reading The Adventures of Tom Sawyer." "Have you read it?" Beatrice shook her head. "I have not read much fiction. Thomas did not approve of novels. He said they filled women's heads with nonsense." Warren's expression darkened slightly. "No offense to your late husband, but that sounds like nonsense to me. Stories teach us about life and help us understand people different from ourselves. There is nothing frivolous about that." "I think I would like to read more," Beatrice said thoughtfully. "Maybe you could recommend some books to me." "I would be happy to," Warren said, and the smile he gave her made Beatrice's heart skip in a way she had not experienced in a very long time. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily from books to childhood memories to dreams for the future. Beatrice found herself sharing things she had not told anyone else, thoughts and feelings she had kept locked away for fear of being judged or dismissed. Warren listened with his full attention, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his own experiences in turn. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about how he had come west at 21 looking for adventure and opportunity, about his hopes to eventually own his own land and build something lasting. "Why have you not done that already?" Beatrice asked. "You have been working for the Reynolds for 5 years. Surely you have saved enough to buy some land." "Almost," Warren said. "I have been putting aside money every month and I am getting close to having enough for a down payment on a decent spread, but I am not in a rush. The Reynolds are good to work for, and I want to make sure that, when I do make my move, I do it right. There is no point in buying land if I cannot afford to stock it properly and hire help when I need it." "That is very sensible," Beatrice said. "Thomas was always in a hurry. He wanted everything right away, and he was willing to take big risks to get it. I always wished he would slow down and think things through." "I am sorry," Warren said quietly. "I know he hurt you even if he did not mean to." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "How did you know that?" "The way you talk about him. There is sadness there, but also some anger and frustration. That is natural. People we love disappoint us sometimes, and it is okay to acknowledge that." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "I feel guilty for being angry at him. He is dead, and it seems wrong to hold a grudge against someone who cannot defend themselves. He made choices that affected your life profoundly," Warren said. "You have a right to your feelings about that. It does not mean you did not love him or that you are a bad person. It just means you are human." Something broke loose in Beatrice's chest, some knot of guilt and shame she had been carrying for months. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." They sat in companionable silence for a while, and then Warren stood. "I should go. It is getting late, and I do not want to compromise your reputation by staying too long." Beatrice walked him to the door, reluctant to see him leave but knowing he was right. "Thank you for stopping by, Warren. I enjoyed talking with you." "So did I," Warren said. He paused at the door, looking like he wanted to say something else, but after a moment he just tipped his hat and left. Beatrice watched him ride away into the dusk, her heart feeling lighter than it had in a very long time. She went back inside and finished her sewing, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Warren and the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her. Spring arrived in full force over the following weeks, bringing with it warmer weather and a flurry of activity on the ranch. The cattle needed to be moved to fresh pasture, the fields needed to be prepared for planting, and there were 100 other tasks that required attention. Beatrice found herself working harder than ever. preparing large meals for the ranch hands, and keeping up with the increased laundry and cleaning that came with everyone working outdoors in the dirt and mud. Despite the busy schedule, Warren continued to find reasons to stop by the house, and their friendship deepened. They began taking walks together on Sunday afternoons, Beatrice's day off, wandering through the fields and talking about everything and nothing. Ruth noticed, of course, and one evening she pulled Beatrice aside after dinner. "Warren Quinn is a good man," Ruth said without preamble. "One of the best I have ever known. If he is courting you, you could do a lot worse." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm. "We are just friends, Ruth. He has been kind to me, that is all." "My dear, I may be old, but I am not blind," Ruth said with a knowing smile. "That young man looks at you like you are the sunrise after a long night, and unless I am very much mistaken, you look at him the same way. There is nothing wrong with that. You are both adults, both unattached, and you clearly care for each other. Do not let fear of gossip or propriety keep you from happiness." "It has only been 6 months since Thomas died," Beatrice said quietly. "Is it wrong to have feelings for someone else so soon?" "There are no rules about these things," Ruth said gently. "Some people mourn for years, and some people are ready to move on much sooner. Only you can decide what is right for you. But do not punish yourself for being alive, Beatrice. You deserve happiness and love, and if Warren can give you that, then you should let him." Those words stayed with Beatrice over the following days, and she found herself examining her feelings more closely. She cared for Warren, she knew that much. He made her laugh, made her feel safe and valued, made her think about a future that held more than just survival. When she was with him, she felt like herself again, not just the broken widow struggling to get by, but Beatrice, a woman with hopes and dreams and the capacity for joy. The question was whether Warren felt the same way. He was attentive and kind, but was that just his nature, or did it mean something more? Beatrice was afraid to assume, afraid to risk the friendship they had built by pushing for something he might not want. The answer came on a warm Sunday in late April. Warren had asked if she would like to go riding with him, and after getting permission from Ruth to borrow one of the gentler horses, Beatrice agreed. They rode out across the prairie, the grass already turning green and dotted with wildflowers. The sky was impossibly blue, and the air smelled of earth and growing things. They stopped by a small creek that wound through the Reynolds property, dismounting to let the horses drink. Beatrice stood on the bank, watching the water flow, feeling more content than she had in years. She sensed Warren come to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "Beatrice," he said quietly, and something in his tone made her turn to look at him. His expression was serious, almost nervous, and he was holding his hat in his hands, turning it over and over. "I need to tell you something, and I hope it will not make things awkward between us." "What is it?" Beatrice asked, her heart beginning to pound. "I have feelings for you," Warren said, his blue-gray eyes locked on hers. "I have for a while now, probably since that first night when I found you in the snow. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was too soon for you, that you needed time to heal. But I cannot keep pretending that I just want to be your friend. I care for you, Beatrice. More than care. I think I am falling in love with you." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "I have feelings for you too," she whispered. "I was afraid to say anything, afraid you would think less of me for moving on from Thomas so quickly." "I could never think less of you," Warren said, reaching out to gently cup her face with his hand. "You are one of the strongest, most courageous people I have ever met. What you feel is valid, and you do not owe anyone explanations or apologies." "I think I am falling in love with you too," Beatrice said, leaning into his touch. "You make me believe that I can have a future, that I can be happy again. I did not think that was possible." "It is possible," Warren said softly. "If you will let me, I want to court you properly. I want to take you to town dances and church socials. I want to bring you flowers and make you smile. And eventually, when you are ready, I want to marry you and build a life together. But we will take it as slow as you need. There is no rush." Beatrice reached up and covered his hand with hers, marveling at how right this felt. "I would like that very much." Warren smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face, and then, very carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, nothing like the kisses she had shared with Thomas, which had always felt perfunctory and dutiful. This kiss felt like a promise, like the beginning of something real and good. When they pulled apart, Beatrice was smiling so widely her cheeks hurt. Warren laughed, a sound of pure happiness, and pulled her into a hug. They stood there by the creek, holding each other, and Beatrice felt a sense of peace settle over her like a warm blanket. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand when the horses would allow it, and when they arrived, Ruth took one look at their faces and grinned. "About time," she said, and Robert, sitting on the porch, chuckled in agreement. The courtship that followed was everything Warren had promised. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, took her on picnics by the creek, and escorted her to the church social in Kearney where they danced until Beatrice's feet ached. The townspeople who had ignored or scorned her when she was desperate now greeted her with smiles. And while some part of Beatrice resented their hypocrisy, she was too happy to dwell on it. Warren was patient and respectful, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give. He seemed content to spend hours just talking with her, learning about her thoughts and dreams, sharing his own hopes for the future. He told her about the land he wanted to buy, a stretch of prairie about 5 miles from the Double R with good water and grazing. He had his eye on a particular parcel, and he was close to having enough money saved for a down payment. "When I have my own place," Warren said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, "I want to build a real house, not just a cabin, something with enough room for a family. I want to raise horses, good strong stock that ranchers will pay premium prices for, and I want to have a garden, a big one, so we can grow our own vegetables and maybe even some flowers." "We?" Beatrice asked softly. Warren turned to look at her, his expression tender. "Yes, we. If you will have me. I know we have only been courting for a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to marry you, Beatrice. I want to build that life with you." Beatrice's heart felt like it might burst from happiness. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Warren pulled her into his arms, kissing her with more passion than before, and Beatrice felt her entire body respond. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Warren rested his forehead against hers. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I swear it." "You already do," Beatrice replied. They decided to wait until fall to get married, giving Warren time to finalize the purchase of his land and start building the house. Beatrice continued to work for the Reynolds, saving every penny of her wages to contribute to their future. Ruth was thrilled about the engagement and immediately began planning the wedding, insisting that they hold the ceremony at the ranch with a proper celebration afterward. Summer passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Warren spent every spare moment working on their house, and on Sundays, Beatrice would ride out with him to see the progress. It was a simple structure but solidly built, with 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a parlor. Warren had included a covered porch that wrapped around the front and side, and he had built a separate summer kitchen to keep the main house cool during hot weather. "It is perfect," Beatrice said the first time she saw it with the roof completed. "I love it." "Wait until you see what I am planning for the garden," Warren said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. He showed her the plot he had marked out, protected from the wind by the house and with good southern exposure. "I thought we could plant vegetables here and maybe some berry bushes along the fence. And over here," he pointed to a sunny spot near the porch, "we could have flowers, whatever kind you like." Beatrice walked through the space, imagining it filled with growing things, and felt tears prick her eyes. "I never thought I would have something like this," she said. "A real home built with love. Thank you, Warren." "You do not have to thank me," he said, coming to stand beside her. "This is as much yours as it is mine. Every decision I make, I am thinking about what will make you happy." The wedding took place on a crisp Saturday in October, with the prairie grasses turned gold and the sky a brilliant blue. Reverend Matthews from the Kearney church performed the ceremony on the front lawn of the Reynolds Ranch, with Ruth and Robert serving as witnesses. The ranch hands all attended, dressed in their Sunday best, along with several families from town who had become friends with Beatrice and Warren over the months. Beatrice wore a new dress that she and Ruth had made together, a beautiful cream-colored gown with lace at the collar and cuffs. Ruth had lent her a cameo necklace that had belonged to her mother, and Warren's youngest sister had sent her a lace handkerchief all the way from Missouri. When Beatrice walked out to where Warren stood waiting, his expression of absolute awe and love made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Warren kissed her with such tenderness that Beatrice felt tears slip down her cheeks. The celebration that followed was joyous, with plenty of food, music, and dancing. Robert made a toast, welcoming Beatrice officially into the community and praising Warren for being smart enough to marry such a wonderful woman. Ruth cried happy tears and hugged them both so tightly that Beatrice could barely breathe. As the sun began to set, Warren and Beatrice said their goodbyes and rode out to their new home, a place that was truly theirs. Warren carried her over the threshold, and Beatrice laughed at the traditional gesture, feeling happier than she ever thought possible. They spent their wedding night learning each other's bodies with tenderness and care. Warren was patient and attentive, making sure Beatrice felt safe and cherished. It was nothing like her experiences with Thomas, which had been brief and mechanical. This was something entirely different, a physical expression of the love and trust they had built over months of courtship. When they finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, Beatrice felt complete in a way she never had before. The first year of marriage was an adjustment as they learned to navigate daily life together, but it was also deeply satisfying. Warren proved to be a partner in every sense of the word, consulting Beatrice on decisions about the ranch and genuinely valuing her opinions. They worked side by side during the day, building up their horse operation and establishing a reputation for quality breeding stock. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, talking about their day or reading aloud to each other from books Warren ordered from back east. Beatrice discovered that she had a natural talent for training horses, particularly the younger ones. Warren recognized this and encouraged her to take on more responsibility in that area, and soon she was known throughout the territory as someone who could gentle even the most spirited colt. She found deep satisfaction in this work, in the trust that developed between her and the horses, in seeing a wild creature become a reliable partner. They faced challenges, of course. The first winter in their new home was harsh, and they had some anxious weeks when snow trapped them inside and they worried about the horses. But they weathered it together, and when spring came, they celebrated by planting the garden Warren had promised. Beatrice chose sunflowers for one corner, and watching them grow tall and bright made her think of how much her own life had changed. In the spring of 1884, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Warren one evening after supper, and the look of absolute joy on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. He picked her up and spun her around despite her protests, then carefully set her down and placed his hand on her still flat belly. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "I cannot believe it." "Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Warren replied. "This is everything I ever wanted. A home, a woman I love more than life itself, and now a baby. I feel like the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Beatrice found the summer heat more oppressive than usual. Warren fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and take on fewer physical tasks. Ruth came by regularly to check on her and provide advice, drawing on her own experience raising 3 sons. Robert built a beautiful cradle and presented it to them one Sunday after church, his gruff manner not quite hiding his emotional investment in their growing family. Their son was born in late December during a snowstorm that reminded Beatrice of that terrible night when Warren had found her begging for scraps. But this time, she was warm and safe in her own bed, with Ruth attending her and Warren pacing anxiously in the kitchen. The birth was long and difficult, but when she finally held her baby boy in her arms, Beatrice felt a rush of love so intense it took her breath away. Warren was allowed into the room once Ruth had cleaned up, and when he saw his son for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "He is perfect," Warren whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Absolutely perfect." They named him James Robert Quinn after Warren's father and Robert Reynolds, and from the moment he entered the world, that little boy was the center of their universe. Warren was a devoted father, getting up in the night to bring James to Beatrice for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just watching his son sleep with an expression of awed wonder. Life settled into a new rhythm centered around James's needs. Beatrice found that motherhood came naturally to her, though it was exhausting in ways she had not anticipated. Warren took on more of the household chores without being asked, and they worked together to ensure that both the baby and their ranch received the attention they needed. James was an easy baby for the most part, healthy and generally good-natured. He had Warren's blue-gray eyes and Beatrice's dark hair, and as he grew, his personality began to emerge. He was curious about everything, always reaching for new things, and he had a smile that could light up an entire room. In the summer of 1885, when James was about 6 months old, Beatrice and Warren received news that Warren's youngest sister Sarah was coming to visit. Her husband had died the previous year, and she wanted to see Warren and meet his family. They prepared for her arrival with excitement, and when she finally arrived in late July, Beatrice took to her immediately. Sarah Quinn was 26, with the same blue-gray eyes as Warren and a warm, open personality. She adored James, spending hours playing with him and helping Beatrice with the household chores. She stayed for a month, and during that time, she and Beatrice became close friends. Sarah talked about her late husband with sadness, but also with acceptance, and she told Beatrice how grateful she was that Warren had found happiness after helping others find theirs. "He wrote to us about you," Sarah said one afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas while James napped. "About how he found you that night and knew he had to help. He said there was something about you that called to him, even from that first moment. I think he fell in love with you right then, though it took him a while to admit it." "I am grateful every day that he found me," Beatrice said quietly. "I do not want to think about what would have happened if he had not." "Well, he did find you, and now you have this beautiful life together," Sarah said. "That is what matters." When Sarah left to return to Missouri, Beatrice felt a pang of sadness but also gratitude for the connection they had formed. Warren promised they would visit his family soon, maybe in the spring when James was a little older and better able to handle the journey. The years passed in a blur of happy domesticity. James grew into a bright, energetic toddler who kept them constantly busy. In 1886, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again, and this time they welcomed a daughter they named Catherine Ruth, after Warren's mother and Ruth Reynolds. Catherine had Beatrice's green eyes and Warren's easy smile, and she was the perfect complement to her boisterous older brother. Their horse ranch continued to prosper, and by 1887 they had established themselves as one of the premier breeders in the territory. They were able to hire a young man to help with the daily work, which gave Warren and Beatrice more time to focus on their children and each other. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen, and Beatrice's garden became the envy of the county, bursting with vegetables, herbs, and flowers. Robert Reynolds passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1888, and Ruth decided to sell the Double R and move into town. It was an emotional time for everyone, but Ruth insisted it was the right decision. "I am too old to run this place alone," she said, "and it needs someone young and energetic to take it forward. Besides, I want to be closer to the church and my friends." Warren and Beatrice helped her with the sale and the move, and Ruth became a regular visitor to their ranch, doting on James and Catherine like they were her own grandchildren. She told them often how proud she was of them, how they had taken a chance on love and built something beautiful together. In 1889, Beatrice gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Thomas Warren Quinn. Beatrice had struggled with the decision to name him after her first husband, but Warren had encouraged it. "He was part of your life," Warren said gently. "Honoring that does not diminish what we have. It just shows that you have the capacity to forgive and remember the good parts." Little Tommy, as they called him, was a calm baby who seemed to observe the world with serious eyes. James, now 5, was an enthusiastic big brother, while Catherine, just 3, was both jealous and fascinated by the new arrival. Their home was constantly filled with noise and chaos and love, and Beatrice could not imagine being happier. One evening in the fall of 1889, after all 3 children were finally asleep, Beatrice and Warren sat together on their porch, watching the stars come out. Warren had his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling completely content. "You ever think about that night?" Beatrice asked quietly. "When you found me, sometimes," Warren admitted. "I think about how close we came to never meeting, how easily I could have walked down a different street or come into town on a different day. It makes me grateful for every moment we have together." "I was so lost then," Beatrice said. "I did not think I had anything left to live for, and then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying. You did not just save my life that night, Warren. You gave me a reason to want to live." "You did the same for me," Warren said, kissing the top of her head. "I had a job and a place to live, but I was lonely. I did not realize how much until I met you. You made me understand what it means to truly share your life with someone, to build something together that is bigger than either of you alone." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable enough with each other that words were not always necessary. Inside, they could hear one of the children stirring, probably James getting up for water, and Beatrice started to rise. But Warren gently pulled her back down. "I will go," he said. "You rest." Beatrice watched him disappear inside, and she smiled to herself. This life they had built, this family they had created, was more than she ever could have dreamed of during those dark days in the winter of 1882. She thought about the widow who had begged for scraps in the snow, desperate and alone, and she barely recognized that woman now. She had been transformed by love and kindness, by someone who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The children grew, each developing their own distinct personalities and interests. James showed an aptitude for working with horses like his mother, while Catherine loved to read and often begged her father to teach her about the stars. Tommy was still young, but he seemed to have inherited his father's steady, reliable nature. In 1892, they finally made the trip to Missouri to visit Warren's family. It was a long journey with 3 young children, but seeing Warren reunited with his parents and sisters was worth every difficult moment. Beatrice was welcomed warmly by the Quinn family, who thanked her for making Warren so happy. His mother pulled her aside one evening and said, "I have never seen my son smile so much. You are good for him, and I am grateful he found you." They stayed in Missouri for 3 weeks, and during that time, Beatrice got to know Warren's family and see the place where he had grown up. It helped her understand him better, seeing the farm where he had learned his work ethic, meeting the sisters who had taught him to respect women, talking with his father about the dreams that had driven Warren west. When they returned to Nebraska, it felt like coming home in the truest sense. Their ranch was thriving, their children were healthy and happy, and their love for each other had only deepened with time. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, faced setbacks and celebrated triumphs, and through it all, they had remained each other's strongest supporters and truest friends. In the spring of 1894, Ruth Reynolds fell ill. Beatrice visited her every day in the boarding house where she lived, bringing soup and clean laundry and sitting with her for hours. Ruth was 80 by then, and her body was simply wearing out. She seemed at peace with it, often reminiscing about her life and the people she had loved. "You and Warren are my greatest success story," Ruth told Beatrice one afternoon, her voice weak but her eyes bright. "I am so glad we took a chance on you that day. You have brought so much joy to my life, and watching your family grow has been one of my greatest pleasures." "You saved me," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. "You and Robert and Warren, you all saved me when I had nothing. I will never forget that kindness." "All we did was give you an opportunity," Ruth said, reaching out to pat Beatrice's hand. "You did the rest yourself. You worked hard, you loved deeply, and you built a beautiful life. That was all you, my dear." Ruth passed away peacefully a week later, surrounded by friends and with Beatrice holding her hand. Her funeral was well attended, a testament to the many lives she had touched, and Beatrice grieved deeply for the loss of the woman who had been like a mother to her. But life went on, as it always does. The children continued to grow, the horses continued to need training, and the seasons continued their eternal cycle. In 1895, Beatrice discovered to her surprise that she was pregnant again at 32. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, and she spent the last 2 months on bed rest under doctor's orders. Warren took over all the household duties without complaint, and the children did their best to help, with James, now 10, proving remarkably capable at cooking simple meals. Their 4th child, a daughter they named Helen Sarah after both their mothers, was born in November of 1895. She was tiny but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and a lusty cry that announced her presence to the world. Warren was just as awed by her arrival as he had been by James's 11 years earlier, and watching him cradle his newest daughter with such tenderness made Beatrice fall in love with him all over again. "4 children," Warren said wonderingly one night as they prepared for bed. When I think about how my life might have turned out if I had not found you that night, it takes my breath away. All of this, everything we have built together, it almost did not happen. We almost missed each other entirely." "But we did not miss each other," Beatrice said, wrapping her arms around him. "You found me and you saved me, and now look at what we have created. A family, a home, a life worth living. That is what matters." "I love you," Warren said, kissing her deeply. "I will love you until the day I die, and probably beyond that." "And I love you," Beatrice replied. "You are the best man I have ever known, and I thank God every day that He put you in my path." The turn of the century found them still going strong, their ranch now one of the most successful in the region, their children growing into impressive young people. James was 15 and already talking about starting his own breeding program. Catherine was 13 and had declared her intention to become a teacher. Tommy was 11 and showed an aptitude for mechanics that fascinated him and baffled his parents. And little Helen, now 5, was everyone's darling, with a sweet nature and a gift for making people smile. In the spring of 1901, Warren made a surprising announcement. He had been approached by the territorial government about serving on a committee to improve ranching practices throughout Nebraska. It would mean traveling to Lincoln several times a year and possibly even to Washington, D.C., if certain legislation moved forward. He wanted to accept, but only if Beatrice was comfortable with him being away from home more often. "You should do it," Beatrice said without hesitation. "You have so much knowledge and experience, and you can help shape the future of ranching in this territory. The children and I will be fine. James is old enough to help with the daily work, and we have our hired hands. This is an opportunity you should not pass up." Warren accepted the position, and over the next few years, he became increasingly involved in territorial politics and agricultural advocacy. He used his influence to push for better treatment of ranch hands, for conservation practices that would preserve the prairie for future generations, for educational programs that would help young people learn proper animal husbandry. Beatrice was proud of him, and she made sure he knew it every time he returned home from a trip. In 1903, James, now 18, announced that he was courting a young woman from town, the daughter of the local banker. Warren and Beatrice liked her immediately, a sensible girl named Emily who clearly adored their son. They were married the following year in a ceremony that reminded Beatrice of her own wedding, full of love and hope and the promise of a bright future. Catherine left for Teachers College in 1905, determined to get her education and make a difference in the world. Tommy, at 16, had developed a fascination with automobiles and was constantly tinkering with engines. Helen, now 10, had announced her intention to become a veterinarian, much to everyone's amusement and approval. As Beatrice approached her 40th birthday in 1906, she sometimes found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the desperate widow begging for scraps in the snow to this woman surrounded by love and success, the transformation was almost incomprehensible. She had survived poverty and loss, had rebuilt her life from nothing, and had created something beautiful and lasting. One winter evening, very much like that night so many years ago when Warren had found her, Beatrice stood on her porch watching snow fall across the prairie. The landscape was transformed by the white blanket, beautiful and serene, and Beatrice thought about how different this winter was from that terrible season in 1882. Warren came out to join her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That night," Beatrice said quietly, "when you found me, how different my life would be if you had walked down a different street." "I have thought about that too," Warren admitted, "but I think we would have found each other eventually, Some things are just meant to be. Do you really believe that? I do, Warren said. I think you and we were always meant to find each other. The universe just needed to arrange the circumstances correctly. And yes, those circumstances were terrible for you, and I hate that you had to go through that. But it brought us together, and I cannot regret that. Beatrice leaned into his warmth, watching the snow fall, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. You know what I remember most about that night? She asked. What? The way you spoke to me. Not with pity or disgust, but with respect. You did not just offer me charity, you offered me dignity. You said I should sit at your table as an equal, and you meant it. That was when I started to hope again, when I started to believe that maybe I was worth something after all. Warren turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You have always been worth something, Beatrice. You have always been valuable and worthy of respect and love. All I did was recognize what was already there. You did the hard work of rebuilding yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it. We did it together, Beatrice said. Everything we have, we built together. That is what makes it so precious. They stood together on the porch as the snow continued to fall. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and created something beautiful. Inside the house, they could hear Helen practicing the piano, the notes drifting out into the cold evening air. In town, James and Emily were setting up their own household, preparing for the baby they expected in the spring. In Lincoln, Catherine was studying to become a teacher, and wherever Tommy had wandered off to, he was probably taking apart some poor machine to see how it worked. This was their legacy, Beatrice thought. Not just the ranch or the horses or the material success they had achieved, but this family they had created, these children they had raised to be good and kind and capable. This love they had nurtured through years of hard work and dedication. This life they had built from nothing, one day at a time, one choice at a time. No regrets? Warren asked softly. Not a single one, Beatrice replied. If I could go back and change things, avoid the hardship and the pain, I would not do it. Because all of that led me to you, and you are worth every difficult moment I endured. Warren kissed her then, and Beatrice felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt the first time he kissed her by the creek all those years ago. Some things, she thought, never change. The love they shared was as strong now as it had been then, perhaps even stronger for having weathered the tests of time and circumstance. They went back inside eventually, drawn by the warmth of the fire and the promise of hot coffee. Helen stopped playing the piano long enough to hug them both, asking if they wanted to hear the new song she had learned. They settled in to listen, and as Helen's fingers flew over the keys, Beatrice caught Warren's eye across the room. He smiled at her, that warm, loving smile that still had the power to make her feel like the most cherished woman in the world. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges, and more joys. James and Emily would have 3 children of their own. Catherine would return from college and establish a school for ranch children in the surrounding area. Tommy would eventually move to Denver and open his own automotive repair shop. And Helen would indeed become a veterinarian, one of the first women in Nebraska to achieve that distinction. Warren and Beatrice would see Nebraska achieve statehood, would watch as the Wild West gradually transformed into something more settled and civilized. They would celebrate their silver wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, and Warren would give a speech about how a chance encounter in a snowstorm had changed his life forever. But all of that was still to come. For now, on this quiet winter evening in 1906, they were simply a family together, warm and safe and content. Beatrice had come such a long way from that desperate widow in the snow, and she knew that every step of the journey had been worth it. She thought about the words Warren had spoken that first night, words that had become a cornerstone of her life. Sit at my table as an equal. He had not just meant at that moment in that restaurant. He had meant in life, in partnership, in love. And for 24 years, that was exactly what they had done. They had sat at the table of life together, as equals, as partners, as two people who had found in each other everything they had been searching for. That night, as they prepared for bed, Warren pulled Beatrice close and said, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked, surprised. "For taking a chance on me. For trusting me when you had no reason to trust anyone. For building this life with me. For loving me, for everything." Beatrice smiled, running her fingers through his hair, which was now liberally streaked with gray. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life." "We saved each other," Warren said. "That is what love does. It saves us, it transforms us, it makes us better than we ever could have been alone." As Beatrice drifted off to sleep that night, warm and safe in the arms of the man she loved, she thought once more about that desperate woman in the snow. She wished she could go back and tell her that everything would be all right, that help was coming, that the best years of her life were still ahead of her. But time did not work that way. All she could do was be grateful for the journey and cherish every moment of the beautiful life she had been given. The cowboy who had found her in the snow had become her husband, her partner, her best friend, and the love of her life. Together, they had created something that would last long after they were gone. A family built on love and respect, a legacy of kindness and hard work, a story of two people who had found each other when they both needed saving. And that, Beatrice thought as sleep finally claimed her, was the greatest gift of all. Not the material success or the comfortable home or even the children, precious as they all were. The greatest gift was the love itself, the simple, profound fact that she had found someone who saw her as an equal, who valued her as a person, who loved her for exactly who she was. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the prairie in pristine white, but inside the Quinn household, all was warm and peaceful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as tomorrow always did. But tonight, they rested together, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that would endure for all their days and beyond. Years later, when their grandchildren asked about how they had met, Beatrice and Warren would tell the story together, finishing each other's sentences the way long-time married couples do. They would talk about the snowstorm, the restaurant, the simple act of offering dignity along with food. They would talk about how sometimes the darkest moments of our lives are actually doorways to something better, if we can just hold on long enough to walk through them. And their grandchildren would listen, wide-eyed, understanding on some level that they owed their very existence to a cowboy's kindness and a widow's courage on one cold night in December 1882. They would learn from this story that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, that kindness matters more than we can ever know, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to help someone else, expecting nothing in return. This was the legacy that Warren and Beatrice Quinn left behind. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a living example of what it means to treat people with dignity and respect, to see the inherent worth in every human being, to extend a hand to those in need. It was a legacy that would ripple out through generations, influencing their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be kind, to be generous, to see opportunities to help where others might see only inconvenience. And it all started with a simple invitation: sit at my table as an equal. 5 words that changed everything, that transformed 2 lives and created a love story for the ages. 5 words that reminded the world that we are all equals in our humanity, all deserving of dignity and respect, all capable of great love if we are just given the chance. The snow fell silently on the Nebraska prairie, covering everything in a blanket of white, promising renewal and new beginnings. Inside the Quinn home, a family slept peacefully, safe and warm and surrounded by love. And somewhere in the darkness, the spirit of that long-ago night lived on, a testament to the power of compassion and the transformative nature of love. This was their story, the widow and the cowboy, and it was a good story. It was a story of survival and redemption, of love found in unexpected places, of 2 people who had saved each other and built something beautiful together. It was a story that deserved to be told and remembered, passed down through the generations as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope is possible, love is possible, and tomorrow can always be better than today. And so they lived, Warren and Beatrice Quinn, through all the years that followed, through triumphs and challenges, through sorrows and celebrations, always together, always partners, always equals at the table of life. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year, until the day came when Warren passed away peacefully in 1925 at the age of 70, with Beatrice holding his hand and their children gathered around. Beatrice lived another 10 years after that, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. She never remarried, saying that she had experienced the great love of her life and needed no other. She spent her final years telling stories about Warren, about their life together, about the night he had found her in the snow and changed everything. When Beatrice passed away in 1935 at the age of 72, she was buried beside Warren in the small cemetery outside Kearney. Her gravestone bore a simple inscription: "Beloved wife, mother, and friend, she sat at the table as an equal." And below that, in smaller letters, "Together forever with Warren Quinn, the cowboy who saved her life and won her heart." Their children made sure that the ranch stayed in the family, that the horses continued to be bred to the highest standards, that the garden still bloomed every spring with vegetables and flowers. They made sure that their parents' story was remembered and told, so that future generations would know about the widow who begged for scraps in the snow, and the cowboy who offered her not just food but dignity, respect, and eventually a love that would last beyond death itself. And on cold winter nights, when snow fell across the Nebraska prairie, just like it had on that fateful night in December 1882, those who knew the story would remember. They would remember that acts of kindness matter, that seeing the humanity in others is never wasted, that love can bloom even in the harshest conditions if it is nurtured with care and respect. This was the story of Beatrice and Warren Quinn, a love story born in the Wild West, in a time when life was hard and survival was never guaranteed. But it was also a timeless story because the themes it contained, compassion, dignity, love, partnership, are eternal. They transcend time and place and circumstance, speaking to something fundamental about what it means to be human. And so the story lived on, passed down through generations, a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, that we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and that love, real love, is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything. The widow and the cowboy had found that love, had built a life on it, and had left behind a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered.